The first gunshot echoed through the mall like a slammed door. People stopped moving. Heads turned. Somewhere, a baby started crying. Near the food court, a man in a black hoodie pushed through the crowd. One hand stayed hidden in his sleeve. His pace was fast, too fast for just walking. In front of him stood a little girl in a yellow dress with white flowers. She was holding a pink ice cream cone, her mouth open, confused. She looked small against the wide, shiny tile floor. Her mother wasn't there. Ethan Cole had just stepped out of the cell phone store with a bag of clearance jeans. He wore a faded baseball cap, his head slightly down. He liked being unnoticed. But he saw the girl, and he saw the man coming toward her. Ethan's body reacted before he could think. He moved fast, cutting through the people who were still frozen in place. He was almost to her when the second gunshot went off. It was loud and close. Ethan hit the girl with his shoulder, wrapping her up and taking her to the ground. Her ice cream splattered across the tile. A sharp pain tore through his right arm. He held her tight. She was shaking but not hurt. The man in the hoodie turned and ran. Mall security rushed over. "Sir, stay down," one of them shouted into a radio, calling for help. Ethan kept his eyes on the girl. "You okay, kid?" She nodded, her face pale. Sirens were already in the distance. People shouted. Somewhere, a tray of food hit the floor. Then a woman ran in, tall, dressed in a dark skirt and blazer, her heels clicking hard. On the tile, she dropped to her knees, pulling the girl into her arms. "Lily, oh my God." She held her tight, checking her over. Then her eyes found Ethan. Her gaze froze on the blood soaking through his shirt. For 3 minutes, everything blurred, security, radios, the rush of footsteps. But the woman's eyes stayed locked on his. She didn't know him, but she would. Before we dive into the story, make sure to like the video and hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep creating more stories. Ethan Cole sat in the back of the ambulance, his arm wrapped tight in white gauze. The EMT had asked if he wanted to go to the hospital, but he said no. He couldn't afford another bill. At 34, Ethan lived a quiet life. He worked nights stocking shelves at a warehouse on the edge of town. He had a small 2-bedroom apartment where his 8-year-old son, Jack, slept in the room with the only window that got morning light. Ethan didn't complain much. But when people saw him, old jeans, calloused hands, they didn't expect much from him either. That was fine with him, most of the time. The woman from the mall stood a few feet away now, holding her daughter. Her name was Claire Donovan. You could tell by her voice when she spoke to the police. Calm, firm, used to being in control. She wore clothes that cost more than Ethan made in a week. People listened when she talked. Claire was the CEO of a growing tech company in the city. Everyone here seemed to know her name. She had a way of making the officers step aside without raising her voice. The man in the hoodie was still out there, and the mall was locked down. Claire's focus stayed on her daughter, but every so often her eyes slid back to Ethan. Not warm, not cold, just measuring. The police took statements. Ethan's was short. He told them what he saw, what he did. One officer barely looked up from his clipboard. "So you just happened to be there?" he asked, his tone flat. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Just walking by." The officer wrote something down, but didn't thank him. Didn't even meet his eyes. It wasn't the first time Ethan had felt invisible. People in uniforms usually treated him like trouble waiting to happen, especially since his years in the Marines didn't show in his clothes, only in the way he noticed things others didn't. Nearby, a man in a gray suit whispered something to Claire. He was her company's head of security. His name was Mark. His job was to protect her and her daughter, and he clearly didn't like that a stranger had stepped into his role today. Mark gave Ethan a slow, suspicious look, like he was waiting for him to slip up. The EMT cleared his throat. "You're lucky it missed bone. Should still get it checked at a hospital." Ethan just nodded. He didn't have insurance. Across the lot, Jack's babysitter's car pulled up. Ethan had called her from the ambulance. Jack hopped out, eyes wide when he saw the bandage. "Dad." Ethan gave him a small smile. "It's fine, bud. Just a scratch." Mark was still watching him. Claire was still silent. The feeling was clear. He'd done something good, but he didn't belong here. 2 days later, Ethan was back at work in the warehouse. The bandage on his arm tugged whenever he lifted a box, but he didn't say anything. His supervisor, Carl, was watching him from the office window like he always did when someone slowed down. Ethan kept moving. Nights here were long and quiet. Rows of pallets, the beep of forklifts, the smell of cardboard. But tonight wasn't normal. Near the end of his shift, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Cole. The voice was sharp male. This is Mark Hensley, head of security for Donovan Tech. Ethan stopped walking. Yeah. We need to speak in person. Today. It wasn't a request. That afternoon, Ethan stood in the glass lobby of Donovan Tech's headquarters. It was all clean lines, expensive furniture, and people in suits moving fast with coffee cups in hand. He felt out of place in his flannel shirt and work jeans. Mark met him at the elevators. No handshake. No smile. This way, Mark said. His tone was clipped. They walked into a conference room where Claire was already seated at the head of the table. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine. Navy suit, hair perfect. But her eyes were tired, and her phone was buzzing on the table. Mr. Cole, she began. We appreciate what you did at the mall. Ethan nodded. I'm glad she's okay. Mark crossed his arms. Here's the issue. You've been in the news. Some reporters are asking questions about you. Your past. We'd like to make sure there's nothing that could put Ms. Donovan or her daughter at risk. Ethan's jaw tightened. I didn't do anything wrong. Mark didn't flinch. That's what we need to be certain of. Claire leaned forward. We live in a world where stories get twisted. I can't have my daughter's name linked to someone who might. She stopped herself. I just need to know you're not a threat. Ethan had been looked at this way before, like he had to prove he deserved to stand where he was. I'm not a threat to anybody. I work. I take care of my kid. That's it. Mark slid a piece of paper across the table. Sign this non-disclosure agreement. And agree to stop talking to the press if they find you. We'll also need to run a background check. Ethan stared at the paper. So you want me to sign away my right to talk about saving her? It's about privacy, Mark said. It's about control, Ethan said quietly. The air in the room went still. Claire's phone buzzed again. She didn't answer it. Instead, she said, we're offering to cover any medical costs from the injury. I'm fine, Ethan said, standing. I didn't come here for money. Mark stepped into his path. Think about your son before you make this harder than it has to be. That hit harder than the bullet. When Ethan got home, Jack was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. How was it? Jack asked. Just a meeting, Ethan said, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. He didn't mention the paper. He didn't mention the way Mark had looked at him, like a problem to be managed. The next morning, Ethan was called into Carl's office at the warehouse. Ethan, Carl said, corporate wants to talk to you. Seems they got a call from someone at Donovan Tech. Ethan frowned. About what? Carl shrugged. Didn't say. But they're nervous. You know how it is. We can't have bad press. Might be best to take a few days off. A few days off meant no paycheck. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Outside the office, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He didn't answer. He didn't know yet if the shot he'd taken was the real wound, or if the worst was still coming. That night, Ethan sat at the kitchen table after Jack went to bed. The TV was on low in the background, some news anchor talking about the mall shooting, but Ethan wasn't listening. He had a small wooden box in front of him. He hadn't opened it in years. The brass latch was worn from time, and when he flipped it open, the faint smell of oil and leather drifted out. Inside were 3 things. A folded American flag, a tarnished military challenge coin, and a letter, creased so many times it was starting to tear at the edges. He didn't take the letter out. He just looked at it. The air was hot and dry, the kind that sticks in your throat. Ethan lay flat on the roof of a sand-colored building, his rifle balanced on its bipod. Through the scope, the streets below looked close enough to touch. He heard his spotter's voice in his ear. Calm. Focused. He adjusted his breathing, slow, steady, and locked onto the target. Every muscle in his body knew what to do without thinking. The shot had to count. It did. Back in the kitchen, Ethan shut the box and slid it back into the cupboard above the fridge, behind a stack of old tax forms. He didn't talk about those years. Not to Jack. Not to anyone. People saw the worn baseball cap, the warehouse job, and thought they knew him. That was fine. Easier. Even. But tonight, with Mark's threat still echoing in his head, he wondered how far they'd go, and if keeping quiet would protect Jack or put him in more danger. At Donovan Tech, Claire was pacing her office. It was late, most of the building dark, but she couldn't shake the image of Ethan pushing Lily to the ground. The way he'd moved, fast, precise, no hesitation. She'd seen people freeze in emergencies. She'd seen people panic. But he hadn't done either. There was something about him she didn't understand. Mark stepped in, holding a folder. "We still don't have the full report on him," he said. "But I found a record of military service. Honorable discharge. No details." Claire looked up. "No details." Mark shook his head. "Sealed." Claire sat back, frowning. She didn't like loose ends. Across town, Ethan sat in the dark, his phone lighting up with another unknown call. He didn't answer, but a thought stayed in his mind. If they pushed him far enough, they'd find out exactly who he was. The call came in on a Thursday afternoon. Ethan was at the kitchen table, helping Jack with math homework, when the knock hit the door, hard, urgent. Through the peephole, he saw two men in suits and a woman with a badge. When he opened the door, the taller man spoke first. "Mr. Cole, we need to ask you to come with us. It's about the mall shooting." Ethan's gut tightened. "Am I under arrest?" "No," the woman said. "But your name has come up in connection to new threats. Against Claire Donovan and her daughter. We believe the shooter wasn't acting alone." Jack looked up from the table. Ethan crouched to meet his eyes. "Finish your homework. I'll be back soon." At Donovan Tech's headquarters, the building was swarming with security. The lobby that had been sleek and quiet days ago was now full of uniformed officers and anxious employees. Mark was barking orders into a radio when Ethan walked in with the agents. His eyes narrowed instantly. "What's he doing here?" Mark demanded. The woman with the badge replied, "Because he might be the only one who can stop what's about to happen." Ethan said nothing, but his eyes scanned the room. The nervous receptionist, the guards shifting at the entrance, the delivery truck idling too long outside the glass doors. Something clicked in his mind. He walked to the security monitors without asking permission. On one screen, a man in a cap and maintenance uniform wheeled a cart toward the service elevator. His posture was wrong. Too rigid. Too fast. "That's him," Ethan said. Mark scoffed. "We've got hundreds of contractors here. What makes you think?" "His right hand never leaves his pocket," Ethan interrupted. "He's hiding something. And he's using a false gait to keep a limp from showing. That means prior injury, probably military or police." Mark blinked, thrown off. "You can tell that from a grainy camera feed?" Ethan didn't answer. He was already moving. The service hallway smelled like cleaning chemicals and oil. The man with the cart was halfway to the elevator when Ethan called out, "Stop right there." The man froze, then kept walking. Ethan's voice went sharper. "You don't want to do this." The man turned slightly, his left shoulder dipping, a telltale sign of someone reaching for a concealed weapon. Ethan closed the distance fast, his injured arm held tight to his side, his other hand moving like it remembered 1,000 repetitions. In one motion, he kicked the cart sideways, sending it crashing into the wall, and grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it until a black handgun clattered to the floor. The man swung at him, but Ethan ducked, hooked his leg, and brought him down hard. By the time security arrived, Ethan was kneeling on the man's back, the gun kicked out of reach. Back in the lobby, chaos had erupted. Employees gathered, whispering. Claire rushed in, pulling Lily close when she saw the weapon in the evidence bag. Mark tried to speak, but the lead officer cut him off. "If this man had gotten upstairs, we'd be dealing with a hostage situation right now." Cole spotted him in under 10 seconds. Mark's jaw worked, but no words came out. Claire looked at Ethan, really looked at him, for the first time without the filter of suspicion. "You've done this before." Ethan's voice was even. "Once or twice." Mark finally spoke, his tone brittle. You have training?" Ethan didn't answer directly. "Let's just say I used to keep worse people than him from hurting good people." There was a long pause. Then Claire turned to Mark. "From now on, if Ethan says something's a threat, you listen." The shift was instant. The same man who had cornered Ethan in a conference room 2 days ago now stood silent, the power gone from his posture. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the police were gone, Claire approached Ethan. In the quiet of the lobby. "You didn't have to come today," she said. "I know," he replied. "You saved her twice now," she said, glancing toward Lily, who was coloring at a table nearby. "And you stopped something we didn't even see coming." Ethan shrugged. "You just have to know where to look." For a moment, there was nothing but the soft sound of Lily humming to herself. Then Claire said, "Maybe I was wrong about you." Ethan gave a small smile. "Maybe." The story hit the local news that night. Headlines read, "Single Dad Stops Second Attack at Donovan Tech." Clips showed security footage of Ethan bringing the suspect down. Reporters called him a hero and a man of few words. For once, the attention didn't come with suspicion. 2 days later, Claire asked him to come back to Donovan Tech. This time, when he stepped into the lobby, the employees didn't stare with doubt. Some smiled. One woman even clapped softly as he passed. Word had traveled fast. Claire met him in her office, the skyline behind her glowing in the late afternoon light. She stood instead of sitting behind the desk. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I judged you based on how you looked, not who you are. That's not the kind of person I want to be, or the example I want to set for my daughter." Ethan nodded, but didn't let her off the hook with a quick, "It's fine." He stayed quiet, letting her fill the silence. "I also owe you thanks," she continued. "Twice now, you've put yourself in danger too. Protect Lily. That's not something I can repay with words." She took a breath. "I'd like to offer you a position here. Head of our corporate security." Ethan blinked. "I already have a job." Claire smiled faintly. "One that barely pays you and doesn't use half your skills. This would come with benefits, health insurance for you and your son, and a salary that means you don't have to worry about rent every month." He looked at her for a long moment. "You sure your head of security will be okay with that?" Her smile sharpened. "He's no longer our head of security. Mark was let go this morning." His arrogance nearly cost lives. In the weeks that followed, the change was visible. Ethan walked the halls of Donovan Tech in a clean black suit, his badge clipped to his belt. Employees who used to look through him now greeted him by name. Some asked for advice, not just about safety, but about life. Claire made a point of telling the entire company what had happened. She didn't downplay her own mistakes. "I misjudged someone based on class and appearance," she said during a company meeting. "That's not leadership, that's bias. And we're going to be better than that." Lily sometimes visited after school. She'd wave at her dad's new friend, always trying to sneak a cookie from the break room. One afternoon, a package arrived at Ethan's desk. No return address. Inside was his folded American flag, the one he had kept hidden in the cupboard. Underneath it was a simple note. "For the times you didn't get the thanks you deserved." He didn't know who sent it, but it didn't matter. That evening, as he locked up, Claire stopped by the lobby. "Big day tomorrow," she said. "The mayor's presenting you with a Community Bravery Award." Ethan shook his head, a small smile playing at his mouth. "Never thought I'd be standing on a stage in front of cameras." "You've earned it," she said. "And you're not standing there alone. Lily and I will be right beside you." For a man who had spent years living in the background, the thought was strange. But as he walked out into the cool night air, he realized something had shifted. He wasn't just the quiet guy in the baseball cap anymore. He was someone they saw, someone they listened to. And for the first time in a long time, he was okay with being seen. A year later, the lobby of Donovan Tech felt different. The walls had framed photos of community events, food drives, safety workshops, after-school programs. In almost every photo, Ethan was there, sometimes in the background teaching kids self-defense, other times speaking to groups about staying calm in a crisis. He still wore his baseball cap sometimes, but now it sat on the corner of his desk, not pulled low to hide his face. People knew him here. They trusted him. Jack was in middle school now, running down the hallway with Lily after school, laughing like they'd been friends forever. Claire's company had grown, but more importantly, so had its reputation. They'd started a veterans hiring program, Ethan's idea, and dozens of former service members now worked in roles that used their skills instead of wasting them. When reporters asked Claire why, she always gave the same answer. "Because I learn what happens when you overlook people. We won't make that mistake again." Not everyone landed on their feet. Mark had tried to get another security job, but word about his failure spread quickly. Last anyone heard, he was working for a small firm in another state. Maybe he'd learned something. Maybe not. Ethan didn't dwell on it. His focus was forward. One quiet evening, after the building emptied, Ethan stood by the big glass doors, looking out at the city. A young employee, new to the company, walked up. "Hey," she said, "I just wanted to thank you. I heard you're the reason they started the veterans program. My brother's starting here next month. He's been struggling since he got out of the service. This means a lot to him." Ethan gave a small smile. "Tell him I'll save him a seat at lunch." She left, and he turned back to the city lights. In his mind, he thought about that day in the mall, the moment he almost stayed out of it. It would have been easier to keep walking. But then Lily's face flashed in his head, and he knew that if he hadn't acted, none of this would exist. Sometimes the biggest changes start with one choice in a split second. Sometimes our greatest enemies help us discover our true strength. Sometimes the people who doubt us are the ones who give us the chance to prove them wrong. Ethan had learned one more thing. True justice doesn't just stop the bad, it rebuilds the good that others failed to see. If this story inspired you, subscribe and share it. Someone out there might need the reminder that they matter, and that one brave choice can change everything.